Hey, how's it going? Another day, another interstellar object drifting through our solar system like it owns the place. This one's called 3I Atlas. The 3I is because it's the third interstellar object we've been able to detect drifting through the solar system, and Atlas because it could use a map. Bro has no idea where he's going. This object is interesting for a variety of reasons, but the public primarily seems interested in it because for some reason they're under the impression it's filled with interdimensional moon vampires. Wake up, sheeple! Alright, take off the stupid hat for a second, let's ask the question, what the hell actually is this thing? Interstellar objects are cool as hell if you think about it. Humanity can send probes all over the solar system to take measurements and collect materials, but everything in the solar system formed together out of one giant dust cloud. So even though the sun and the planets here are all very different from each other in a lot of ways, they're all similar in the sense that they were all produced at the same time from the same big pile of material. But interstellar objects have the potential to be much more alien and weird. The object we're talking about today, which at time of recording is almost at its closest approach to the sun and has dropped below the orbit of Mars, is thought to be way older than our entire solar system. Our system only formed 4.5 billion years ago. This thing had already been around for a few billion years when that happened. It looks to have traveled into our solar system from the direction of the galactic core, which is really cool. So we know that 3I Atlas is an interstellar object because of how fast it's going. In most cases, when we see a comet, which is one of those giant celestial sperm cell looking things as if it's been left over by some kind of nebulous cosmic orgy, it'll be in orbit around the sun. Imagine for a second that there's an object in a circular orbit around the sun, but it's way out in the Oort cloud, so it's so far away that the sun's gravity is barely able to hang on to it and prevent it from flying into interstellar space. If that object bumped into something and slowed down even more, it wouldn't be going fast enough to keep moving in a circle, so it'd fall down towards the inner solar system. And then since it's free falling towards the sun, it would pick up speed as it falls. Eventually it'll swing around the sun really fast and get flung out into the outer solar system again before eventually making it back to the place it started. That's a highly elliptical orbit, and that's what most comets do. Most people think of the Oort cloud as a giant sphere of things orbiting in a circle around the sun really far away, but it only looks like that because if you take a snapshot of all the things in highly elliptical orbits, they spend most of their time in the slow-moving, far-out part of that orbit. Anyway, when we see a comet, we figure out how far away it is and how fast it's going, and that tells us what its orbital trajectory is. The faster a comet's going, the further out into the Oort cloud it must have come from, because it's had longer to fall, which is why it's going faster. But if the object's moving fast enough, the furthest point in its orbit will have to be so far away that it will actually be outside the sun's sphere of influence, fast enough that it must have been coming in from interstellar space, because free-falling in all the way from the Oort cloud still wouldn't get you going that fast. And that's the dealio with 3I Atlas. So let's go through a quick rundown of the object. And by the way, I'm not a comet expert, I'm barely a comet enthusiast. I'm a comet guy who wandered in off the street and started saying things authoritatively, so if anyone in the audience makes a living as an open comet surgeon or some shit, please be respectful when calling me a stupid bitch with all his facts wrong. So it's a comet, which is kind of more or less basically a big ball of ice. As comets heat up when they get closer to the sun, some of that ice turns into a cloud called a coma, and the solar wind then pushes on that cloud, which gives the comets their characteristic long wispy tail. Technically, comets actually have two different tails that point in slightly different directions, one made of gas and one made of dust, but I mean, who's counting? Anyway, the weirdest thing about 3I Atlas to me is that it's got a tail, but it's pointing backwards, or well, rather, most comet tails point backwards, but this one is pointing forwards. Actually, that's still not right. Okay, usually, comet tails point away from the sun because the comet is in space, which basically means it's in free fall, and so are all the little pieces of ice and dust that have come off of it as it's heated up, as it's gotten closer to the sun. The thing that takes that cloud and turns it into a tail is the solar wind blowing the particles away. So a comet has a long tail behind it when it's on its way to the sun, but that tail usually ends up turning and pointing in front of it when it's moving away from the sun, because the tail always points away from the sun. 3I Atlas is weird because it's still moving towards the sun, but the tail seems to be in front of it. Like, most comets Naruto run, but this one is hailing a taxi. Okay, for some reason the tail's pointing at the sun, not away from it. I couldn't find a gigantic amount of information on this effect, so take the following statement with a boulder of sodium chloride, but it seems to me that an anti-tail is a phenomena that we have observed in other objects in the solar system before. It sounds almost like it's more like a perspective illusion where particles are orbiting the comet and they're illuminated on one side from our perspective when the comet passes through the Earth's orbital plane. But again, I'm not an expert, but this apparently is a thing that has happened before. 3I Atlas also has a lot of CO2 compared to comets that are native to the solar system, which might mean it was formed in an incredibly cold region of an alien star system before being ejected into interstellar space for some reason. And there's some other small differences in terms of the comet's composition versus what we have native to our star system. Basically, this comet is not quite the same as anything we've ever seen here, but it's nothing to freak out too much about. It's not as if it's made out of Dolmio sauce or some shit. The ExoMars orbiter took some pictures of this thing as it flew by Mars, which is cool as f***. Although the images are pretty low quality since this orbiter was designed with the intention of taking pictures of the surface of Mars, not looking up into space. There are some other deep space missions which might capture some information on it as well, so keep an eye out for the next month especially if you really want to find out more information about this object. Sorry to interrupt, this is just a quick message to say, statistically speaking, you're probably not subscribed, so I'll make you a deal. Press the subscribe button and I won't come over to your house and do this. Alright, thanks, back to the video. Anyway, we've done the overview of what the comet is, so now it's this part of the video. Listen, a lot of other people on this platform have argued that this is something mysterious, and they've done the whole I'm just asking questions, aka it's definitely aliens routine. Others have politely and very patiently and perhaps slightly frustratedly explained that it's almost certainly not aliens, so I guess I'm just going to take the last available option on the dialogue tree, which is to be an asshole and say, of course it's not aliens, you dumb bitch. When there's a bunch of hype in science about something, I think you can tell fairly easily whether you should be losing your shit about it based on how the idea came about. Like, I'm pretty sure if you really want to know the reality of whether alien spaceships exist, you'll want to do two things, right? You'll want to, one, minimize the possibility of there being alien spaceships that you miss because, you know, you don't recognize something as an alien spaceship, or you were just looking in the wrong direction when it was there, or something like that. And two, you want to minimize the things that you see and think are alien spaceships when they're actually not. Put simply, you want to minimize false negatives and false positives. Okay, how do you do that? Well, first off, ideally, know as much about any relevant subjects as possible, and then, once you've done that, try and predict what to look for. This is a good idea on both fronts. On one hand, you can target the things that you're actually looking for instead of spending extended periods of time squinting at every object in the observable universe, and on the other hand, it also means that when you find something we think might be xeno scum, you can compare it to the shit we preemptively thought could be an indication of alien spaceships to see how the evidence stacks up. And this is where the Three-Eye Atlas's aliens hypothesis eats shit into a ditch as far as I'm concerned. Like, in your mind, go back to a time before we were talking about this object and ask yourself, when you envisioned alien ships visiting the solar system, what was the picture that you had in mind? In fact, think of anything that you thought might have been likely. Do any of these pictures look like what we're seeing? Did you have in mind something which looks and behaves completely and utterly indistinguishable from a comet, except for the composition being slightly weird and the tail pointing forwards? Like, is that what you pictured? Is that the thing we should be flipping our tits over? Did you picture it drifting through the solar system on a trajectory which doesn't change at all, and which keeps it on the far side of the sun from the one planet with life on it in the entire solar system? I'm struggling to think of a reason why it would conceivably be doing any of that. Given the lack of any infrared sources on the surface, it could be an attempt at stealth, I guess, but it's a pretty abysmal one considering we weren't even looking for it and we still saw it from like 500 million kilometers away. I do seriously doubt that this is what anyone had in mind. Like, what are these aliens meant to be doing? What are they? Fucking deep space icicle people? Was that seriously the hypothesis you had prior to coming up with excuses for why this particular thing has to be aliens? There's even professional science people lending credence to this goofy bullshit. The most notable of which is a physicist who's currently giving this a 30 to 40% chance of being artificial to some degree. I'm pretty sure this guy said something similar with respect to Oumuamua, which was the first interstellar object we saw. So given we've only seen 3 interstellar objects so far, this guy seems to think that 2/3 of all the random bullshit that enters the solar system might be an alien, which maybe I'm missing the point, but to me that is so aggressively stupid it makes me want to rest my cranium on a belt sander until my neurons cease to exist. I'm trying to think of an analogy, but none of the ones I can think of are actually stupid enough. It's sort of like wandering around in the desolate wastes of Antarctica, seeing 3 rocks on the floor and thinking to yourself that 2 of them have a good chance of being little houses which just happen to look exactly like rocks. Except that's more likely than the alien comet thing, because at least we know the Earth does have some buildings on it. Like, if we're honest, the cosmos is a giant question mark as to what the deal is exactly. We have literally zero idea how common life is. Like, we just have no idea. We don't know. We can't just fucking assume aliens every time something 1% different from normal happens. I'm pretty sure butt plugs exist, but I wouldn't be 66% sure that a person selected at random has one in their arse. Pretty sure that analogy didn't work either. My point is, yeah, this comet has some weirdness about it, but it's an interstellar object. It would be weird if it wasn't weird. There's even more things that people have brought up about this being, you know, unusual, about how it's polarizing light weirdly or whatever. But again, all of these things are just kind of interesting. They don't mean aliens. They're cool, natural phenomena. I wish people would be more enthusiastic about what they actually are instead of making up fucking fanfiction about it. Xandros, you just don't want it to be aliens. Bro, I just want to know what's actually fucking real. Screaming about aliens every time something happens in space is not conducive to actually figuring out if aliens exist. If anything, it's a distraction which makes it harder to figure out if aliens are actually there or not. It's like a team of adventurers going on a quest to find out whether a dragon really lives in a valley nearby, but the fucking night elf druid in your party wants to lick every blade of grass on the way and he's high as fuck on the mushrooms you licked earlier, so 60% 90% of the time he wants to stop and have a prolonged conversation about how this particular blade of grass tastes a bit like a dragon, and then the group gets famous throughout the entire kingdom for having discovered dragons that can turn into blades of grass, and then when it predictably turns out to be bullshit, the entire group of adventurers that just wanted to go looking for dragons gets cowpats thrown at them every time they walk into a town for getting everyone's hopes up about dragons, when the overwhelming majority of the adventurers in the group never wanted to waste their time licking grass in the first place. And then you've got to make amends by agreeing to marry one of the king's daughters who's into butt stuff, and it's not her butt, it's yours. And I'm not sure this analogy worked in the first place, but I've definitely lost the thread of it now. Anyways, as always, thanks to my elite level supporters, Thunderbolt22A10, who leaves a trail of ions and dust particles wherever he goes, Nomad Greg, who warps the fabric of space-time for a living, Andrew Mall, who just woke up from a billion-year slumber inside the Earth's mantle, John Bejarano, who can see out of his ears, JDK, who's almost figured out how to act like a human, Mutantious Doom, who was just discovered inside a volcano, and thanks to all my other supporters too. Don't forget to join the Patreon or the channel membership if you want to be featured in the video credits or chat on Discord, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Over and out.